All right, y'all, welcome to the Scott Horton Show. I'm the director of the Libertarian Institute, editorial director of antiwar.com, and author of Provoked, How Washington Started the New Cold War with Russia and the Catastrophe in Ukraine. Sign up for the podcast feed at scotthorton.org or scotthortonshow.com. I've got more than 6,000 interviews in the archive for you there going back to 2003. And follow me on all the video sites and X at Scott Horton Show. All right, you guys, on the line, I got Max Blumenthal, the editor of the Grayzone. Welcome back. How you doing?
Doing well.
Good. Happy to have you back on the show, man.
Definitely.
So we got a lot to talk about. I guess first we got to do the top headline. Leaked audio, AIPAC leader details control over Trump NatSec team. Everybody can find that on YouTube and wherever else, I'm sure, at the Grayzone. Substack and the regular website. The audio is terrible, so I'm not going to play it in your interview here for everybody to ruin their ears in the cars, but you can pull it up on YouTube. We'll put it in the show notes, I guess, there. But so tell us what we got here, because it's a lot of fun.
Well, we have, as you said, very distressed audio recorded by an attendee of AIPAC's 2025 Congressional Summit. And there is some video online from that summit. Benjamin Netanyahu's speech, Yair Lapid, the head of the Israeli opposition, spoke. A few others, but then hundreds and hundreds of AIPAC members, like rank and file of that organization, go to breakout sessions, and those are off the record. And you have Israel lobbyists delivering panels to them, which are more candid than you would get on the main stage with the cameras rolling. And one attendee provided audio to the Grayzone of one of those panels in which the new CEO of AIPAC, whose name is Elliot Brandt, boasts about essentially controlling top national security officials in the Donald Trump administration. So Elliot Brandt said that one of the key advantages that they have here with John Ratcliffe, the CIA director, Elise Stefanik, whose nomination to UN ambassador was withdrawn, Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, Mike Waltz, National Security Director, is that all of them served in Congress. And to get into Congress, for most members of Congress, you rely heavily on pro-Israel money. And then once you get in there, you are answerable to an AIPAC person who is sort of an AIPAC professional in your district. And throughout your entire time in Congress, they're telling you, we'll support you for re-election. We're going to make sure you outspend your opponent. No one will be able to get in as long as you do our bidding. And then they get into an administration as a top national security official after serving on like the Foreign Affairs Committee, various appropriations committees where they vote for aid to Israel. And what Brandt said that I thought was so revealing was that if anything unusual takes place, for example, if the administration starts diverging from the Israeli agenda, then we have good lines of communication and we can get access to the conversation. That's what he said, and find out what's going on. So basically, let's say the Trump administration rebukes Netanyahu and demands a ceasefire to get the hostages out and doesn't allow him to abrogate the deal as they did. What Brandt is saying is, we'll just go call the CIA director. We'll talk to Marco Rubio and we'll find out what's going on internally in the Trump administration, who's driving this agenda. Then they can organize, they can organize attacks on those people. They can get stuff out to the media. Certainly they're going to notify Israeli intelligence. That's my reading. And it reminded me of the various espionage scandals from the past in AIPAC and the fact that AIPAC is not an American organization, although its membership is American. It was sponsored, its foundation was sponsored by Israeli intelligence when it was formed as the American Zionist Committee by Isaiah Kennan, as the researcher and historian Grant Smith documented. I'm sure you've had him on your show.
Oh yeah.
So that's pretty much just that's the first batch of comments that I was able to get in this audio.
Yeah. And it's really just incredible. It's what we already knew, but that's how it goes, and that's how they talk. And I don't know. I like it. It's great because it's two things that we could already guessed. The role of the Israel lobby or its influence with the members of Trump's cabinet. It's pretty obvious what they all had in common. All
Yep.
the people that got picked there, and then also seeing that, of course, yeah, like the House is the easiest to control because they're small little districts and it doesn't cost that much money to win an election or to jam up the other guy. And so they can wield a lot of influence there. And, everybody's got their AIPAC minder already in place. Everybody has their speed dial already set. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, it's perfect from their point
Yeah,
of
I
view.
mean, Thomas Massey, one of the few members of Congress who isn't controlled by AIPAC or influenced by AIPAC, a libertarian Republican from Kentucky, said in an interview with Tucker Carlson that everyone in Congress has an AIPAC person who minds them.
Yeah.
And he was denounced and ridiculed as a crazy conspiracy theorist. But here you have, from an alternate opposing angle, the CEO of AIPAC saying exactly the same thing in an unguarded moment without the cameras rolling.
Now, Max, help me remember, was it the Al Jazeera special investigative report on the lobby where they talked about when you even run for Congress, somebody from AIPAC comes to you and says, okay, here's a piece of paper, sign it, and it's about your pledge of loyalty to Israel and our goals, and how it's on from there. You either say yes or you say no, and if you say no, you're doomed. They're going to pour a ton of money into your opponent, and if you beat him in the primary, then we'll see you in the fall. And if you win in the fall, then we'll see you in 2 years. Vendetta. Nobody crosses us. Nobody tells us no. And it's just like that from the moment you even say you're running for the U.S. House. In any district in the whole country, basically. We're maybe excluding somewhere in Alaska or something, but maybe not.
Yeah, and even if you go beyond AIPAC, into Chris Van Hollen territory, the senator from Maryland, you get supported by J Street, which is a liberal Zionist organization, which denounced Rand Paul when he said the U.S. should cut off arms and aid to Israel just because it should be consistent about foreign aid. And
Terrible.
so you have, there's no way out of adhering to some form of the Zionist agenda. And AIPAC's job, they openly say this, is to pursue the line of whatever Israeli government is serving. Now we see the Israeli government that's in power now, the coalition, is the most right-wing government in Israel's history. Most fanatical, most messianic, most genocidal. And they're going to pursue that line no matter what, because it's Israel's government. So if you are, if you say a word against them, they're going to go nuclear on you. That's what they did to Jamal Bowman and Cori Bush, members of the squad who opposed Netanyahu, opposed the genocide in Gaza. They spent a combined $20 million to take them out. Mm-hmm. With Cori Bush, they found a local party hack and just pumped money into him until, Cori Bush's voice was drowned out in her district. And with Bowman, they did the same, but I think they ran someone who had who had been the alderman or had been he'd run the party machine for a long time in a more conservative part of the district. George Lattimore. Hillary Clinton came in and endorsed him, and that was it. But Lattimore wasn't even going to run. And the person who ran against Cori Bush, Wesley Bell, he also had promised Cori Bush he would never run against her. But AIPAC comes in and it incentivizes them to run and guarantees them victory, and then they change their mind. Lattimore was completely comfortable as this local party hack. but now he's in Congress. I mean, he never thought Hillary Clinton was going to come in and endorse him. Hillary Clinton is also someone who has received millions of dollars in speaking fees from the Israel lobby throughout her career. But the most interesting thing about this audio isn't just the electoral congressional component of it. It's that you have a speaker on this panel named Dana Stroul, who is a functionary in the Pentagon bureaucracy, has been a Pentagon, high-level Pentagon civilian official on the Middle East Bureau under the Biden administration, and she was one of the chairs of the Syria study group, which was issuing recommendations on basically how to destroy Syria to the Pentagon and State Department. And on this panel, you listen to her and it sounds like you're listening to an AIPAC employee. I mean, she just sounds like a straight up Israel lobbyist. She's saying, Israel, flip the script on what you can do to our enemies in the Middle East. The pager operation was awesome. They're using the F-35 more than we use the F-35, so they're testing it in battle. We get as much intelligence from Israel as we give to Israel. There's only, so, if the far left and the far right doesn't want American men dying in conflicts in the Middle East, there's one strong country that can take out our enemies and is willing to take casualties for us. It's Israel. And I'm listening to it thinking this person served in the Pentagon as the highest ranking civilian official in the Middle East Bureau. It's basically like an Israeli agent was in there.
Yeah. Well,
she doesn't see any daylight between the U.S. and between American and Israeli interests at all.
yeah, no, of course not. Even though they're completely opposite, they have us fighting on the side of the guys that knocked the towers down against their enemies who never did really anything to us, or, it was kind of proto-Hezbollah that bombed the Beirut barracks in 1983. But then again, the Israelis knew it was coming and specifically chose not to warn the United States about the impending attack. So that kind of makes that one a wash, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I mean, just look at the whole Khobar Towers trial, which was the U.S. government blamed it on Iran, and the trial consisted of one expert witness after another, cultivated and paid by the Israel lobby to blame Iran when Al-Qaeda was responsible.
Yep. And bin Laden proudly took credit for it. Told Abdel Bari Atwan, you're damn right I did it.
Yep. Exactly.
And who was the target? 1996 Khobar Towers attack. 19 American airmen. Right? So talk about getting right to the point. That was what it was all about. American airmen stationed in Saudi Arabia. It was literally those men whose job it was to bomb Iraq, enforcing the no-fly zone over the south of the country. And that was what it was all about. That and support for Israel, of course. And, of course, why the dual containment policy? Because Israel. Martin Indyk, who is Yitzhak Shamir's guy, was the one who insisted that Bill Clinton adopt the policy.
Yep. And Martin Indyk founded WINEP, the Washington Institute for Near East Policy, which is now Dana Stroul's employer.
Oh, well, there you go.
Along with Robert Satloff and all the other, I think the most influential pro-Israel think tankers in Washington who are feeding the policy through AIPAC to Congress.
He announced the dual containment policy in a speech at AIPAC, or at WINEP. I flubbed that line. In a speech at WINEP, which he had founded, as you said.
Amazing.
So, yep.
I mean, I could go on and on about Khobar Towers, but I just think it's
a huge one. I'm so glad you brought it up.
It's indicative of a wider problem where the U.S. believes that its enemies are identical to those of Israel, and they've created just now a security vacuum in Syria, along with some of the worst human rights crimes we've seen in recent years, simply because Israel didn't want weapons being transferred to Hezbollah across Syrian soil. Now Israel is threatening a new war in Syria against Turkey.
Yeah, tell us more about that. I saw where they had bombed an airbase that the Turks were preparing to claim. That was the last I knew, so tell me lots.
Well, Syria is now, I mean, it has been kind of a chessboard for a great game. The Syria dirty war failed in its objectives because Russia and Iran came in defense of the Syrian government and momentarily ended the great game. But now it's restarted with the capturing of government by Ahmed al-Sharaa, aka Mohammed al-Jolani, who was an ace up the sleeve of Recep Tayyip Erdoğan, the Turkish president, who's really right now in failing health. A lot of Turkish people don't even know this because their media is so censored. And his administration is being run by the head of Turkish intelligence, MIT, named Ibrahim Kalin. And they're carrying out a series of deals right now that look like political expediency. It looks like they're letting Abdullah Öcalan out of prison, who is the longtime PKK Kurdish leader, considered the worst terrorist in Turkey, which is stunning. And one reason is the Kurds are a kingmaker as voters in Turkish elections are coming up. So the AKP party of Erdogan wants the Kurdish vote. But there seems to be something else taking place. I mean, the Turkish intelligence sees the Kurds as kind of like a base for U.S. and Israeli influence, and they want to negate it. The Kurds have also cut a deal with the new government in Damascus. So there's a power play going on there. And then you have Israel. So basically, Turkey, through this Syrian rebranded Al Qaeda leader, Ahmed al Sharaa or Mohammed al Jalani, it controls the most populated areas of Syria, the four most populated cities. But Israel's moving in and trying to establish what it calls a security buffer, but which is really a military occupation of the entire Syrian Golan. They've moved their forces in with no resistance at all from al-Sharaa and the new Syrian government. Not one bullet has been fired at them. And they've gotten as far as Druze towns in the Damascus suburbs. And what took place there was Israel started saying, hey, we're here to protect the Druze from this crazy al-Qaeda government that's threatening them. But al-Sharaa, with Turkish management, came in and gave the Druze some security guarantees, some financial support, and cut a deal and winkled the Israelis out. But the Israelis are trying to encircle Damascus. And at the same time, they are attacking Syria constantly to wipe out what's left of the military hardware left over from the government of Assad, which was like the last time that Syria posed any threat to Israel. And they most recently destroyed an entire airbase known as the T4 airbase. They were attacking this airbase constantly under Assad. And that's because the IRGC in Iran had officers there and were using it to bring in military hardware to support the Syrian government. And some of it was going into Lebanon to defend Lebanon against Israel through Hezbollah. But now Turkey is seeking to take over that airport. It's just outside Homs, one of the four major Syrian population areas. And Israel has declared that Turkey cannot bring in any military support at all. They're warning Turkey not to get involved in Syria. And I don't know where the U.S. comes down on this, because this was at the top of Netanyahu's agenda when he met with Donald Trump on, what was it, like 3 days ago? And Netanyahu sort of expected Trump to denounce Erdoğan. And unexpectedly, Trump said, I like Erdoğan a lot. I've been his friend for a long time. We've done great things together. And that sort of irked Netanyahu. He wants to be the dominant force in Syria and consolidate this vision of greater Israel. They want to get control of everything up to the Litani River in Lebanon, get Hezbollah disarmed, get the Lebanese government to be so weak that it signs a normalization deal. And they want to make sure that Turkey doesn't fortify the Syrian government so that it could actually resist Israel's control of the southern part of that country, which extends all the way up to the Damascus suburbs. And Netanyahu wants Trump to attack Iran. That's clear. We don't know if Trump is going to attack Iran. We should expect that that is a likelihood until this April 12th meeting between Steve Witkoff, Trump's negotiator in Oman, and the Iranian foreign minister, Araghchi. Until then, I mean, the U.S. has like 1/3 of its B-2 bomber squadron positioned at the Diego Garcia Air Base, ready to strike Iran. And I think, all the signals are flashing red. However, the negotiations in Oman at a place of Iran's choosing are encouraging. And Iran definitely doesn't want this war. Does Trump want this war after the whole tariffs chaos? I doubt it, but Netanyahu is pushing. He's pushing. Like, this is like what he wants. This is his legacy to be, is an attack on Iran. Because Netanyahu is like nearing the end of his life, nearing the end of his tenure. A regional war would make Netanyahu, it would not only fulfill his lifelong vision, it would ensure that he can stay in office for as long as he wants. And if he leaves office, he faces all these corruption trials and possibly even prison.
Yeah, we've talked for a long time about the potential consequences. I'm going to switch back to Syria in a minute, but since we're on this, we've talked about the potential consequences of a war with Iran if it's really a full-scale air war against them and an attempt to completely destroy their nuclear program and things, that we would expect them to go ahead and launch all their missiles that they can at American targets in Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, Saudi, and then probably economic and UAE, and economic targets all up and down the Gulf too, close the Straits of Hormuz, this kind of thing. But then, I don't know, I'm so used to saying that, I rarely stop and go, and then what's going to happen after that? What are Saudi and Bahrain and Qatar? I mean, not that they can do that much about it, but it wouldn't just be Americans getting hit there. It would be their countries getting hit. And that is like the Netanyahu doctrine has been trying to line up all these Sunni kings on his side against Iran. So then, not just to contain Iran, but to make them all fight. Like, I could see that too, It makes sense that as long as you're go for broke. But at the same time, it served his interest to play bad cop to America's good cop this whole time. Remember in 2012, there were a lot of people who really thought that Israel was going to attack Iran and force Obama into a war. I think Obama was afraid of that, but he was just bluffing. He was just trying to get Obama to, play harder ball in the diplomacy and that kind of thing. You know what I mean? So, yeah. I don't know.
Definitely. I mean, there's very good reason to believe that Trump and CENTCOM in frustration in Yemen have gotten the Saudi and Emirati militaries, which are basically mercenary forces, to agree to a land invasion of northern Yemen with U.S. air support to restart the war that had ended early in the Biden administration. This would be a test run for Iran, and to see the entire Yemen project is like a pilot program for Iran, testing bunker busters and so on. And it would also be a test of those militaries, which failed miserably, relying heavily on Sudanese mercenaries during the first Yemen war. So what are those countries capable of doing if Iran strikes them? They have the THAAD system, they have Patriot batteries, but are they really capable of doing anything? They're basically glorified oil companies. And can they defend all of their oil installations as well as their shipping? I think that's the key here. A lot of people are focusing on whether Iran can defend its nuclear sites and whether Iran, can repel cruise missiles fired by the U.S. as well as, the B-2 bunker busters. And I don't think that's the issue. I think you're looking at, a months long war with attacks on shipping and shutting down the Straits of Hormuz. And it's an economic war that would break the back of the global economy. And Donald Trump would be singularly blamed for it, along with Israel. Israel, I don't think, would care as much, but it would, after the tariffs chaos, be the final discrediting episode in Trump's career. I can't imagine that he would politically survive it.
Yeah, I mean,
And that's where Israel is leading us.
you know what? This is the silver lining on this, right? Is that if you go back 20 years to them lying us into war with Iraq, man, they had all these reasons, and then they'd say under their breath, yeah, and he backs, he gives money to Hamas, this kind of thing. Whereas here, the contrast is just so stark. There's only one war party now in as far as Middle East policy, and everybody can see it. It's just the neocons. It's, in other words, the vanguard of the Israel lobby, right? Their foreign policy device, their, whatever you call it, apparatus in the United States. And so, it's either America first or Israel instead. You can't, confuse this with, it's the Muslim caliphate again, or what, go back to Glenn Beck propaganda circa 2007 or whatever. Yeah. It's not going to stick, right? This is just about what Israel wants.
It is. And if you look at this new Pew poll, which shows that most Americans have a negative view of Israel, 50%, a little over 50% of older Republicans have a negative view of Israel.
Wow.
Oh, no, over 50% of Republicans.
I guess.
Republicans of a certain generation. I want to make sure I get it, so I'm gonna pull it up. But in the last 2 years, negative views of Israel have surged among groups of Republicans that were wildly pro-Israel. And I mean, whatever the specifics are, that's the America First base.
I got it right here. It says, so overall with Republicans, it's 37% disfavor, but among Republicans under 50, they are about 50-50, it says, 50 to 48, unfavorable.
18 to 49, it has gone, negative views of Israel have gone up from 35 to 50% among Republican and leaning Republican.
Yeah, that's
so
great.
Basically that's the social media generation.
So I was going to ask you about that too, man. So here's the thing about it, okay, is on the liberal left side, the Democratic Party side, right? There's just the most obvious bifurcation in the world. It's just night and day. You got the donors versus the voters.
Yep.
Simple as that. And everybody knows it. And then on the right, it's becoming more and more that way, especially, part of the Republicans' problem is Donald Trump always speaks in such hyperbole. I brought peace. I'm such a non-interventionist. Oh, we got to do all these things Israel wants us to do instead real quick first. Is just such a blatant hypocrisy. George Bush never talked like that. He always promised interventionism. You know what I mean? But the contradiction here is so bad. And so many people believed in MAGA because it meant America first, and America first really meant defend America first and leave the world the hell alone, which is what that term really means from before Trump times. To betray that now, it's so stark, even to threaten to, like everybody's talking about the threat of war with Iran, and it's already got everybody split. It has to, and more, because it's obviously such the wrong thing to do. More and more people are just going to get better on it, and so then we're going to have the same situation again, where it's more and more just the donors versus the voters on the Republican right and the Democratic left. And then what, Max? What does that mean for American politics? How sustainable is that? Where it's just the Israel lobby has captured the parties, but the populations of both parties just don't want it anymore.
Yeah, that's why I went to the Democratic convention when Kamala was nominated, and I snuck down into the area in an area where VIPs were passing through, and I just threw cameras in the faces of all the VIPs, all the speakers, Cory Booker and Terry McAuliffe, and um, the Stevie Wonder came through. I mean, it was
Really?
a who's who. Pete Buttigieg. And I just asked them. I was like, "How are you able to defend this genocide? Like, do you have anything to say against it?" Chuck Schumer passed by me. Is there any amount of dead children that will lead you to change your mind on this? Like, how much? And then I just would start. If I caught them where they couldn't escape physically from my camera, I would just start saying, "How much money have you taken from the Israel lobby? How much?" And I asked Steny Hoyer that. He's one of the biggest recipients of Israel lobby money. They refused to answer the question. They've never been asked that question by a reporter before, ever. Cory Booker couldn't answer. I mean, I made Cory Booker shut up. I'm like the only man in America who is, I should get like a huge trophy. I'm the only man in America who's made him shut up. This is a guy who can talk for 17 hours straight without, going to the bathroom. And it's just because I asked how much Israel lobby money he's taking. And, it looked like everything was normal, business as usual, arena filled with drooling fanatics for the for cheering on Kamala as she went up on stage and claimed that all these women had been sexually assaulted on October 7th and hideous things had happened, and the U.S. had to support Israel no matter what. But it really didn't resonate with the broader American public and with with the Democratic Party's youthful base, that part of the base that supported Bernie in 2016. They turned their backs. So it isn't even a question of how much longer can this continue. Like it ended. There's no Democratic candidate at a national level who can get up there and start issuing pro-Israel bromides in debates and in convention speeches and expect young people to just come along and vote for them. I've been a part of this whole Palestine solidarity scene for 15, 20 years, going from campus to campus, talking about my work, what I've learned, my books. That's the way I'm going to get out there. Traditional bookstores aren't going to host me. I'm not allowed on the networks. So I got to know all the students who were like the first generation of the Students for Justice in Palestine chapters. I was the first speaker at Students for Justice in Palestine's Brandeis chapter, a traditionally Jewish school, my father's alma mater, named after the Jewish Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis. And it was a great event. A lot of pro-Israel students were there. We had a debate, but it was like, it wasn't like a mob scene. It wasn't crazy. It was productive. They were banned after October 7th, tear gassed when they tried to host a sit-in, arrested by local Waltham police, brutally arrested, just for trying to maintain this student chapter. No, oh, you're all pro-Hamas. They're all getting banned. They're all getting criminalized. They're not going to come out and vote for some presidential candidate or congressional candidate who's supporting that. And what I'm saying is that what I was seeing at that time was so much more niche than what I see now, where when I'm like in the streets of Manhattan or Brooklyn, where young people live, gentrified neighborhoods or areas near college campuses, everybody's pro-Palestine. You see kufias everywhere, signage supporting Gaza everywhere. And you didn't have that before. It's sort of becoming mainstream among youth culture.
Mm-hmm.
And
So
there's just
listen,
no way the Democrats can deny that any longer. They're just going to have to rule by force, but that means they can't win elections like this.
yeah. Hey guys, I've had a lot of great webmasters over the years, but the team at expanddesigns.com have by far been the most competent and reliable. Harley Abbott and his team have made great sites for the show and the Institute, and they keep them running well, suggesting and making improvements all along. Make a deal with expanddesigns.com for your new business or news site. They will take care of you. Use the promo code Scott and save $500. That's expanddesigns.com. Man, I wish I was in school so I could drop out and sign up for Tom Woods' Liberty Classroom instead. Tom has done such a great job on putting together a classical curriculum for everyone from junior high schoolers on up through the postgraduate level. And it's all very reasonably priced. Just make sure you click through from the link in the right margin at scotthorton.org. Tom Woods' Liberty Classroom. Real history, real economics, real education. Scott Horton Coffee. It's a thing. It's really great stuff, too. The Scott Horton Show Supreme Breakfast Blend from Moondoe's Artisan Coffees at moondoesartisancoffees.com. I drink a lot of coffee, and I drink a lot of Folgers and things over the years, but I'm never going back now. Moondoe's is so good, and they have great wholesale deals for all you restaurateurs and Quickie Mart managers out there as well. They're now doing online commercial sales to coffee houses, coffee trailers, restaurants, and bakeries. So help support this show. Drink anti-war coffee. Click the link in the margin at scotthorton.org or just go to scotthorton.org/coffee. Seriously, buy some. And thanks. And so it's interesting because, I mean, this is just Wall Street Journal reporting, so don't anybody get me wrong. It's just the facts that it's a small handful of Jewish donors fund 2/3 of the Democratic Party, and they happen to be Zionists. But I want to ask you, I don't think I've ever really asked you too much about this before, but it goes to the whole question of Jewishness and Zionism and all of that. I gave a speech at Princeton the other day, but hardly anybody showed up because Naftali Bennett crashed my party.
Oh, right.
Somebody invited him to give a speech a couple of doors down in the same building. So he sucked up all of that oxygen, but it was still okay. But then when I was leaving, there's a big protest outside. There's at least a few hundred people, and it was cold and rainy out, and there's still a few hundred people out there. And it was funny because I was on the wrong side of the barricade, so I was joking with my friend, like, geez, I hope they don't think I'm a Zionist. Because they didn't know who I was, because none of them saw my speech. Anyway, that was my should have been audience right there, was out there protesting. But at the front, and they had all their signs and whatever, and at the front were a bunch of Jews, and I could tell because they were wearing black hats and cloaks and stuff like that, for whatever exact sect that they were representing there, and they were right there with Zionism with a bloody skull on it and whatever with the rest of them, and so. But then I wanted to contrast that with another thing that I saw, which was probably the best thing that Tucker Carlson's ever written. And he's been pretty good for about a decade now. But, man, he wrote this great thing. I'm sure you saw it on Twitter about how we better not do this. And anybody says we should attack Iran, they're not your ally. They're the enemy of this country. Like, yeah, all right. That's what I want to hear, man. America first, for real. And then this lady, Caroline Glick, who you're probably more familiar with than I am, but I remember her from the W. Bush years as being a war hawk, neocon, fellow traveler type who wrote for the whatever papers. And so I saw where a friend showed me, she quote tweeted Tucker Carlson's great thing, where he attacked the neocons. He named the neocons as the ones pushing this policy. And she says, call us who we are. The Jews and the Jewish people and the people of Israel. That's our name. And I thought, like, I'm not exactly sure what she's getting at with that. If she's just trying to put those kind of words in his mouth to make him seem anti-Semitic, or if really she's just that presumptuous to speak for, yes, of course, I and all other Jews say we must bomb Iran immediately, no matter the cost to America, or what exactly is going on there. But I just thought, it was such a contrast with a bunch of Jews, helping to lead at least the big protest at Princeton the other day, which I happen to be eyewitness to. So and of course, you and many of your friends are anti-Zionist Jews. So I just wonder what you think about all that and what role it all plays in the conversation going on now, especially when you have students being removed from the country for going to a protest with the likes of you,
Yeah, I remember during the run-up to the Iraq War, David Brooks, who was a neocon, said the same thing and said, what are they saying when they're talking about the neocons? They're basically saying we're a Yiddish trilateral commission. And he actually had to publicly apologize for saying that. for whatever reason. But
That's
that's
funny.
what all the neocons thought, is this is really about
It's
anti-Semitism.
pronounced AEI, dude. Go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. Not AEPI, which is the Jewish fraternity. But hey, there's a crossover. I mean, most neocons traditionally have been Jewish and are dedicated to using American power as a basis for consolidating Greater Israel. I mean, it's their fault that anti-Semitism is rising, if it is, and it's the fault of the self-proclaimed Jewish state. They're they have captured a large part of a large segment of Jews across the West, from London to New York to LA. Most of them are Zionist to varying degrees, but most of them just cannot accept a world without Zionism. And they're in a quandary, a moral and political quandary, because Israel is committing a Holocaust. Their children get the chance to say, hey, I'm not going to participate in this. Or, you'll see with maybe some of the Gen Xers, Jewish Gen Xers, they'll say, I'm not going to send my kid to Hebrew school. I just am not going to put him in a Jewish communal place because this is just getting too ugly and I don't want them to be indoctrinated into Zionism. Maybe we'll find like an alternative setting, or we're just going to kind of move on because I don't want them subjected to pro-Israel education and going on birthright Israel. And the overall effect of most Jews being Zionist, and then most neocons being Jewish, and the self-proclaimed Jewish state declaring that it is the voice of the Jewish people worldwide, is increasing anti-Semitism. I mean, more and more people are going to say, why, how can I distinguish between Zionists and Jews? I mean, you and I can do it because we know so many anti-Zionist Jews. And I can also do it because I know a lot of, being in a large Jewish family and knowing that some of them might say that they, support Israel, but in private, they're just like disgusted. You see the shades of gray there, but most Gentiles, I don't think they can see it any longer. And the more and more they exist on social media, the more stark the picture becomes. And they develop attitudes which would be considered anti-Semitic. Hey, what's up with Jews? They're like the sledgehammer of fascism. They're calling for banning and censoring anyone who talks about Israel. And that does create a certain level of peril for Jews in the West. I still think we're living in a golden age in the United States, but it creates a certain level of insecurity. And what Jews need to understand, what everyone needs to understand, but especially Jews, is that it is Zionism that demands that we live in insecurity. It requires that we live in a state of insecurity, instability, and existential peril for as long as we are in the diaspora and refuse to participate in the ingathering or make aliyah and move to Israel and join the Israeli military. Why would they want us all living here scattered when they need manpower, when their reserve forces are depleted, when they're in a demographic trench war with Palestinians, when they could be they're suffering a brain drain, and their economy is based around research and development and tech, when they need professors and so on, doctors. I mean, they imported all these Russian Jews because they were skilled labor. It was like basically the equivalent of a Zionist H-1B visa. They got 1.5 million Russian Jews, many of them with no connection to the Jewish religion, who went to church. And they're all like nurses and doctors in Israel. That's what they want to destroy Jewish life as we know it in the West, where like my neighbors aren't Jewish, but I still, observe the holidays. They don't want that. They want me in the settlements. When I was on the Birthright Israel trip, Scott, I got offered to move into a settlement, like with a sweet deal, practically for free. They were like offering me my own place, and they would have like put a wife in there too if I had wanted it. So what Jews need to understand is that this whole crisis that they're experiencing is the product of Zionism, that they are living through the fulfillment of the terminal logic of Zionism.
You know, it's funny too to even use the term diaspora when the vast majority of American Jews families have been in the United States since long before Israel existed.
Yeah, I don't
You
even
know,
know why I call it that. It's just like I
it's
mean,
just
my
funny,
family
but
never lived there.
yeah, yeah. American Jews aren't from Israel. I mean, some of them are, but very few, obviously, relatively speaking. They're like, Israel has no claim. This is so funny listening to Donald Trump go, "Oh, I can't believe how disloyal you American Jews are to Israel." It's like, what loyalty should American Jews owe Israel at all? What a
Yeah.
weird presumption that any Americans should owe any loyalty to any foreign state, especially coming from the president of the United States to say that. You guys
Yep.
aren't good enough at being devoted to a foreign power. Really? Jeez.
Yeah.
All right, wait. So I want to go back to smart things you says about the Syria thing there. So I'm just fascinated about the new situation in Syria and the role that Al Qaeda and the new regime in Damascus plays exactly as you were characterizing it in the power play between Israel and Turkey now over who's dominant there. And I wonder whether it's all just speculative about the future, I guess, but I wonder whether there even will be a Syria or just eventually Netanyahu and Erdogan are going to sit down and draw a new line and just divide it between the two of them. I don't think the Israelis want the whole country all the way up to the Turkish border, right?
No.
But how much, like, on the map of the wild-eyedest greater Israel project there, where exactly is the line? About halfway across? It includes which cities, or do you know? Like how big their eyes are here?
I mean, Quneitra, they took Mount Hermon, which is the highest point in Syria, and they're like building ski slopes there, but they're putting military bases and like surveillance stations up there. And then they're taking the Quneitra, which is the biggest population area in southern Syria. And once they believe that once they have that buffer zone, they can get all the way up to the most distant population areas around Damascus, which is the next largest city on the way into like the M4 highway, which connects the four major population areas leading all the way to Aleppo, which is the northernmost city, which has always been sort of contested between Syria and Turkey and is right below Idlib. And then you pretty much just you block the Syrian contiguity with Lebanon, which helps encircle and strangle Hezbollah or any resistance faction, which includes Shia tribes in the Bekaa Valley. And you starve Syria of its water supplies. There are like 20 important reservoirs in the Golan. They've done that. And you prevent the Syrian state from being reconstituted. At the same time, you just sit back and watch the Sunni supremacist regime that has come into power slaughter Alawites and just hope that Muslims keep killing one another instead of resisting you. That's what they've gotten so far, but it's pretty clear Turkey wants to stabilize the Syrian state. So Israel's going to do everything it can to prevent that. Well, Israel would also love to see like an independent Kurdish state. Israel and anarchists also want that, which is funny. So in northeastern Syria, Israel is very concerned about the United States military leaving. That would lead to probably a like either it would force the Kurds to have to deal with Turkey, and so Israel is meddling in U.S. politics and the Trump administration to prevent him from pulling those troops out, even though he's announced that he wants to. But a Kurdish state, if would be a base for Israeli and U.S. control. It would be like another Israel in the region. Israel's always supported that. It would be directed against Iran and Turkey simultaneously.
I guess
I'm
I
not
wonder
going
whether
to be able to forecast the regional picture except to say that like I expect Syria to be in a state of instability for years.
yeah. I mean, I wonder what's the best Al Qaeda can do, even with Turkish support, in terms of running a country. And everybody says how Abu Muhammad al Jalani has been to Turkish public relations school and all that. But
Yeah.
if he's that much of a suck up, then somebody's just going to cut his head off and take his place, literally or figuratively, and remove him. And I mean, because they are all a bunch of kooks. I mean, look at who he's the leader of, is an army of guys who they can't all have gone to PR camp. You know what I mean? They still
No,
got
it's like
swords and
Planet of
shit.
the Apes. Like he was selected by a military council of some of the worst warlords that the region has ever seen. There was no popular vote in support of him. He's definitely done what his masters in Ankara want him to do. But he unleashed the dogs on the Alawites, and tens of thousands have just been slaughtered in their homes. The
Is it
interior,
tens
like
now?
what's that?
Is it tens of thousands now?
I mean, the official count was like 4,000, but I'm hearing
Yeah.
that it's much, much higher.
Okay.
You should have Josh Landis on too.
I
He's
should.
covering
Yeah.
that really
That
well.
was, I think, the last number I saw was from him, but that was a few weeks ago.
But I mean, this is one of the worst human rights crimes of our time outside of Gaza, and there was just a muted response, if anything.
I
From
debated Roy
Western
Gutman
media, and
about it the
Western
other day.
governments just tolerated it and kept relieving sanctions on Jolani. But yeah, as long as I mean, he's the perfect guy to have there for Israel and the West for a lot of reasons. One is that his presence in the undemocratic state of his military junta, the fact that like his justice minister was presiding over street executions of women accused of being haram and having sex out of wedlock in Idlib, the fact that he's just surrounded by barbaric figures, it justifies sanctions which keep the Syrian state from reconstituting.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think that is a mutually shared objective between the U.S. and Israel is to keep Arab states as weak as possible.
And man, I'm sorry. I know we're out of time here, but real quick, can you elaborate a little bit on the state of Erdogan's health? Because that's the first I've heard of that, but I'm out of touch.
This is just the rumor mill in Turkey that it's sort of like the rumor mill in the United States, a much more open media environment about Joe Biden, that he had dementia, but his handlers and the sort of official stenographers in the media refused to acknowledge it and dismissed it as a conspiracy theory. That's what's happening in Turkey. And Erdogan is said to have been fighting cancer. He does appear a little bit frail in public, and it's very clear whether or not he's healthy that he's being run by a series of characters from behind the scenes, like Ibrahim Kalin, who was the first Turkish official to enter Damascus after Jolani took over the city. Like 2 days later, he walked through central Damascus and basically said, like, yeah, I'm running the show. He's the one who's presiding over all the deals with the Kurds. And, interestingly, you see these huge protests in Turkey, like millions of people barely registering with Western media, which is interesting. I mean, if this was happening in Moscow, it would be like the front page story. They'd be like, could it happen? Could freedom happen? And Erdogan is extremely repressive, but he's in NATO and he has served NATO well. A lot of those protesters are nationalists who don't like the fact that they're cutting deals with the Kurds, who they consider to be non-Turkish. Or
Yeah, I was going to ask,
un-Turkish.
is there a specific set of grievances? And then also, are they sponsored by the USAID too, or what?
Yeah, I mean, Imamoglu, like, what is his agenda? Is he going to be more of a stooge for NATO than Erdoğan. I can't really speak to that.
Yeah.
But Turkey clearly, other than outside of Israel, Turkey's not seen as a threat to Western hegemony.
Yeah, of course not. They're a member of NATO.
Remember,
wonder-
NATO and their economy is so integrated into the Western financial system, which runs through Tel Aviv, that there isn't much they can do without having their currency tanked, and their inflation rate is through the roof.
Yeah. Man. All right. Well, listen, I'm sorry we're out of time because I got a lot more questions on all of these topics, but it's been great. And thank you for all your great journalism and your time on the show again, Max.
Thanks a lot, Scott.
All right, you guys, that's Max Blumenthal. He's the editor-in-chief over there at the Grayzone. That's thegrayzone.com. And they also have a Substack, and he wrote a bunch of books, including Goliath, all about Israel and things like that. Thanks for listening to The Scott Horton Show, which can be heard on APS Radio News at scotthorton.org, scotthortonshow.com, and the Libertarian Institute at libertarianinstitute.org.